and the government, and you guys have a strong group working together, that makes a huge, huge difference. Because these guys are going to have to go in there and try to help shape curriculum. And they do. And they will go in. So that partnership with the colleges and universities has to be really good. Because that's how we're going to get kind of this base, right? That's how they're going to get their base employees from in the sustainable future. So they have to make sure that they can work with them. So I would put that as a very high priority on your list if you're trying to attract IT. BPO is very interestingly different. Most of the BPO firms that we talk to, they are, because there is more turnover in BPO, they are training machines. They train, they want the high school graduates, they want things, but they actually don't want someone else to do their training courses for them. But they do want help in recruiting and job selection, and then, they got to train as part of their core competency. They're training their people and running them through. So they might want some assistance and dollars with that, but they are going to keep a lot of that training in-house. Okay. Skill sets of the workforce, so depending on what you're doing, and actually if you look at the back of the report, we actually pull skill sets. We kind of try our best to categorize the skill sets. You guys can take a look at that. Net migration potential. Is there a big city? Like I think this, Atlanta, Augusta is a great example. Is there a big city just far enough that some people want to have a different lifestyle will move over, and we'll get some of that talent pool who wants different lifestyle, doesn't want to commute anymore, etc. So that people look at that. And then current resource availability. You heard a couple people talking about one locale right now has 10 or 11% unemployment. That gives them a good boost in when they come in, that they have this ready, that they're not starting out with full employment, that they have to steal from other places. So that does become a factor. And the competition I already spoke about. Here, absolute top priority is just the business, government, and college. I'll tell you, we went and we did a few projects, and we've seen the different economic development agencies, and I'll just talk about Sherman and Denison in Texas. I mean, unbelievable cooperation between those three. And you see it right away, and it makes you feel comfortable that, oh my God, these guys are going to help me. Because when you're in smaller places also, these guys know how to get around, they know how to get things done, because maybe you do have a bandwidth problem, or maybe you have a phone issue, and who are you going to call? Big cities, we don't ever call anyone from the, we don't call anyone from the government to kind of help us out. We have to just figure it out on our own. And these guys are unbelievably linked in with everyone and supportive. And so this, when I looked at different places, I would just put that at like the top of the list of when you're considering, because you don't know what problems are going to come up and challenges ahead. And if you have that supportive consortium that's working well together, all these unresolved problems that you didn't anticipate are there, along with that political support. There are still certain areas that have very strict labor laws. I mean, most of those have kind of gone away, but you kind of do have to look at that. We don't see that as that much of an issue anymore. And then you'll see that, I don't know if you guys saw Systems in Motion, they really cared about that big technology ecosystem. And then there's some companies that don't care about it as much. But it definitely, there are some vendors, they want to be within an area where there's a lot of tech companies, like Silicon Valley kind of, obviously Silicon Valley is one example, but they want to be in those. And so, there's only so much you can do about that, but I think a sprinkling of that supply that helps them have some sort of ecosystem is definitely something that everybody has brought up. So that's it. Quality of life, you guys are already really good at this. I'm not going to spend any time on that. I don't think it's any different from anyone else you were trying to attract in. The challenges. In Tier 1 and Tier 2 locations, it's workforce retention. When the economy starts doing well, everybody starts fleeing, right? And that's everywhere. And then, that sustainability and fluctuation of cost savings. Because of that, and because the prices tend to rise higher in these locations during the good times, there's this, fluctuation that's a lot larger than in the Tier 3 or Tier 4 locations. Tier 3 and Tier 4 have different challenges. Scalability, especially IT. The breadth of skill sets, they have to be kind of built up. A lot of times they don't exist. The lack of business ecosystem, and availability of appropriate real estate. And that's what I say. I think a lot of times a town can just get turned down because at that point in time, they just don't have a building that was going to fit. And I'm sure you guys have had that issue. So we're starting to see that that's becoming a big item. So I'm going to give my North Texas example. So we have, we did, what type of company is appropriate for what type of city. So I talk about communities like Grayson. It was a larger city of 50. How much is it, Grayson, now?
1.2. Yeah, 1.2. Two cities are about 70.
Okay. Okay, great. And then Fannin was about 10,000, I think, when we looked at it. Okay, so very small community. So we kind of looked at both of these and said, kind of extrapolated, what is appropriate, what is the type of company that would work here. So typical skill sets, we did have low to mid, and we had some high level in the Grayson area. Okay. The typical size limits for an outsourcing firm, we would say about probably up to 300 employees for a BPO call center, but it could actually sustain 100 to 150 on the high tech because of those partnerships they had with education and because they do have net migration potential from Dallas. Okay, so they maybe couldn't have a lot of those, but they definitely could have one or two of those, and as the traffic gets worse and worse in that area, it's only going to get better for them on that front. But Fannin, on the other hand, because it was small, really felt could not probably sustain an IT. That they would be a BPO or call center because of the skill sets available in that town at about 100 people. But 100 people center in that town would be fantastic, right? So typical outsourcing activities I went through, and I kind of put some of the main challenges. And what we did was we didn't put every challenge that Grayson or Fannin did. What we tried to do was kind of extrapolate what would be the challenges that are particular to these size of communities that were typical, where that's what we were trying to do on this. So workforce availability always will be retention and marketing of these areas, because these are still smaller areas, right? On the Fannin side, there is a workforce skill set issue, and we've talked about, I think the providers in here were great to talk to in really rural areas, and what are some of the challenges of when you're trying to retool some of the people with high school or not even high school education, and how do you have to retool those people? So that was definitely a challenge. Of course, we did not find, we don't find as much kind of the real estate availability issue in towns with 50,000 or more. That's usually something that can be overcome. But real estate availability and business ecosystem in the smaller towns is still an issue. So it was great. This project that we did with them was really good and formed. We got a lot out of it in terms of how to help other areas of similar sizes that and with the prior work that we did. Okay. So I'll talk about just some kind of key takeaways and then just questions and discussion, please. I would really like to hear, I realized I didn't kind of go through the incentives, but I would really like to hear from you guys to share what types of things are working for you, what's not, what's working, what's not working when you are attracting companies. Incentives, one of the ones that we noticed, which a lot more of the companies have started putting out is, outsourcing is a labor business. So you have to kind of rethink your incentives, very kind of focused on labor. Training, incentives, job creation, how many jobs. Training dollars are important, and a lot of places don't have those. So that's kind of almost more important than the infrastructure, necessarily, because if they're adding jobs and they can have some training help with money for training, I think, that's something that's pretty high on the list. So any kind of incentives that have to do, and what's great about those is they very much tie well to job creation. I mean, it's really a direct tie. So, whereas if you have a building, you don't know how many jobs, you can't be 100% sure of how many jobs are going to end up there. But these, if you can make them variable based on the job creation, That's going to be very valuable. And if you can make them ongoing, if they're not just in your year one, we'll do this for, if you create X amount in your year 2 or year 3, we are able to do this. And really kind of motivating them, because a lot of these companies have different sites, to bring them, to expand that center versus another center. So it's not just about bringing them in. Would you, Marcos, what do you?
Something I would like to add is I'm thinking more in the longer term. How can you make it sustainable?
Okay.
Because some of the incentives, they may be helpful to set you up, but in the long run, and I think, I have these kind of conversations with multiple governments, in some cases, China, Mexico, and I think the most valuable incentive is when they help you to really, number one, create these training programs that can lower the cost, but they are permanent. But the other one is how can they are promoting, the government promoting and investing in promoting that industry in the location, because they are helping, they are helping programs like Mexico IT, funded by the industry and by the government to attract clients to that location, to sell that, to create joint programs with, high power buyers, that they commit some part of their spend to this kind of buying or these kind of companies. Especially for small companies, when you are trying to start up, it's very hard to compete, because at the end of the day, the hardest thing to get is to get clients. Is to convince a customer that you are a viable option. And if you don't have the government behind you in this kind, in a county or in the state, there's a strong initiative for them, and they are attracting these customers for the state. It's tough. It is really, really tough to convince someone else to go on.
Right. And, it's really good you brought that point up, because I actually didn't put it down there, but some of the companies that we spoke to, one of the things that, you can have this model of how people choose, and then there's always people who just chose completely differently, right? It happens to all of us. But one of the ones where it just went off the charts was the revenue potential. Because there were some people who came in, and this is, I think, what Marcos is alluding to. There was, some companies that came in and said, look, we're going to give you this project. We're going to have you do our IT project, our IT. And that was the case with, I forget the name of it. Lebanon, Virginia, the company that set up there 200 people 7 years ago. They got a project from the state government as a suite to come in and set up a 250,000, or 250 person center in this very small town that was 10,000 people, 10 or 12,000 people. It was a very, very small town, I think, somewhere between 10 and 20. And they just went with them. They got that project. They had their, that investment was covered for them in that one project, and that center has taken off since then. So it is a point, if you can add that sweetener where you feel you can bring in clients or an engagement to that, and that help and support from an ongoing perspective. And I like the point you bring, that you have to kind of ongoing market, you have to be interested in that area, right? If you're interested in outsourcing today, and then tomorrow, 6 months from now, you're not, and that vendor kind of gets left with no resources, that's tough, right? And that does happen. We all know the priorities shift, right? So that kind of commitment is very important. So my key takeaways, and I think some of these already went up to, is really ensure that close relationship, because when you have to build a workforce on the supply side, you really need the education agencies and workforce development to work with you. It's very different when you're bringing in a company where maybe the job creation is a little bit more stable, and they're going to hire 20 people and then that's it. This outsourcing, by its nature, has a churn. You want there to be some churn. People are moving up. You're getting a lower thing. So being able to kind of help them with that is very important. On that note, adding the labor-related incentives. Outside of getting new clients, that's probably the number one thing. Because the quality and skill sets of the resources, getting them to that level, that they're really going to care about that, because that's their ongoing concern. Availability of real estate will be a key and final decision. So Although it won't be the cost, I mean, cost is always an issue, I'm not saying it's not, but I think costs can get a little bit equalized, and you can have visibility to that. That availability of, I think it's, it's going to be, nobody, when they first start out, sets up necessarily in Class A, but it's Class A and Class B office space. That's it. Some people want Class B, some will do Class A. They're pretty good. All the companies are pretty good at doing their build-outs. They're used to having to do that. They may not be used to doing it in the U.S., so you may need some help with that. But for some of the offshore, but they are used to doing their build-outs. They have teams who know how their buildings need to be set up. So that's usually something that they can do. Workforce development agencies should assist with hiring and have the ability to develop customized training courses. So there are some people who want the customized training courses from the workforce development. A lot of people do it in-house, but we did see that if anything, they want the customized one. So you're going to have to make one specially for them and then run it for them versus a general kind of training. Think through revenue. I'm glad I did have this. Think through revenue generation opportunities for them. It's an extra value add. It definitely tips the scale at the end. And this is like really simple, and it doesn't really apply just to this industry, but a point one liaison, the economic development agencies that we saw that were the best at doing this, were they just had one person that they could go to get all their questions answered. And it was really their customer service rep almost. And so I thought, that made our projects easier. We had one person to talk to who did everything and introduced us to everyone in the town, and God, we finished it all in 3 days. That was amazing. It could have taken us 3 weeks if we had to call everyone individually. And so that was, I think, is really important. We just had one gentleman at lunch tell me that they were really looking at a certain state, and they called them up, and they just didn't respond. They just kept giving them they just didn't want it. They really wanted to be in that state. They dropped the state. It was just not getting that right person on the phone with them at that first couple times, and they didn't feel like they really wanted it, and that there was some, and I'm sure there was someone there who did, but they didn't get that right assignment of a person to take care of them when they were interested, which I'm sure all of you in this room don't make that mistake. But I think having that one liaison, that makes it easy for them, because if you think about it, having to go to all the different cities and figure it out, it's a lot of work, right? When you're trying to figure out which city to go to, when you haven't necessarily looked at the United States before, because there's a lot of companies that haven't set up delivery centers ground up yet, who are doing it this year, seeing a lot. So anyway, that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions or any discussion items? Yeah.
What type of incentives have companies gotten offshore, or none at all?
Yeah, definitely the one that's harder is the tax. And I'll let Marcos. There's definitely been very